So thank you, Councillor Journeau, and welcome Councillor Demota, who assumes the role of Deputy Mayor for September and October. Councillors, you have today's proposed agenda. Are there any additions, deletions, or other changes to be made to that proposed agenda? If there is nothing, may I have a motion, please, to approve the agenda as presented? Councillor Journeau, all in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. The minutes of the regular meeting of August 18th have been circulated and are attached to the agenda. Are there any errors, omissions, or corrections required to be made to those minutes? If not, may I have a motion, please, to approve the minutes of the August 18th, 2020 regular meeting as presented? Councillor Butler, thank you. All in favor? There are none opposed. That's carried. Agenda item 4, presentations. We have nothing scheduled. Nothing has changed. Nothing to add. Mr. Furcho?
No, Your Worship, just as on the schedule. Thanks.
Agenda item 5. Is there any business arising from the minutes of August 18th? Councillor McGrath.
Thank you, Mayor Ireland. Just making sure you can hear me. Is my sound good?
Yes, excellent.
Great, thank you. I'm curious for clarification with administration regarding the S block parking. I know in the report that we received when we voted on the way in which administration would administer the parking stalls, that businesses would be given first priority. However, it's been brought to my attention that a resident who would like to use it for residential and would be willing to pay the fees that we put in place was told that it's for commercial only. So I understood that commercial would come first and foremost, but I'm not understanding necessarily what the administrative procedures are with people that are willing to pay the fee that would otherwise maybe only be seen as commercially appropriate, and what our process is right now, and just for further clarification so I can understand and speak to the resident about this.
Mr. Furcho?
Thank you, Your Worship. Through to Councillor McGrath. The notification and this process for people to sign up actually was just made live today. So I'm not sure when that came in. But what we've been telling everybody to date is that, you know, the original intent was to get the commercial type equipment and trailers and trucks and whatnot out of the town site and into the industrial area where they belong. So the first round will be to see how much uptake there is, and then once we get an idea of that, we could look at it, opening it up to other uses. But the first little while here, we would like to limit it to that original intent of the parking lot, to move the commercial stuff out there. So if there is other people interested, just hang tight, and you know, if we get minimal uptake and there are a lot of vacancies, then we could look at that in the future. We still have the unfinished business of those external sites as well to deal with at some point. So more to come, but really just to get the party started. The notification is out. We do have a system for people to sign up, and we are looking for that commercial type stuff first.
Thank you, Mr. Furcho.
Thank you, Councillor McGrath. Is there any other business arising from the minutes of August 18th? If not, we can carry on to agenda item 6, department reports. Report from Protective Services, Director of Protective Services, Mr. Van Tegem, I presume can join us.
Yes, I'm here, Your Worship. Thank you, and thank you, Council. Can you hear me, Your Worship?
Yes, thank you.
Oh, okay. So thank you, Council and Your Worship. You have the report, and I would be happy to field any questions that you may have, but I will add that I neglected to include something in the report when I hurriedly compiled it last week, and that is the update on the Fria forest fuel management project coming into this winter season. I will be having a visit from a couple of people from Fria, which is the organization that provides the government grant funding for the fire smart forest fuel reduction work tomorrow, and we will be doing a site inspection tomorrow afternoon. And as well, our contractor and our logging or our fuel reduction contractor will be in town next week, and we will be doing another site inspection, and we will be GPS mapping all the new zones or the updated zones coming into this project. And just to be clear, some of the work that we will be doing is a continuation of the last year's work that didn't get finished or that we've expanded on. We are also partnering with Parks Canada again this year. We have a verbal agreement for support from Parks Canada, and I have been in meetings with Landon and Katie in that regard. We also will be partnering with ATCO. Met with ATCO approximately a month ago, and we looked at some of the areas where our work sites also share the power right-of-ways. And ATCO has agreed to take care of anything along their power line right-of-ways that relates to our Fire Smart forest fuel reduction work. And we also have a continuation agreement with Canadian National Railways, and we will be completing a unit that they had helped fund last year. And so it will be basically full steam ahead as soon as we get the conditions, which will mean enough snow cover and frozen ground. But in the meantime, we'll be preparing the GPS mapping and getting the crews ready. And again, we'll be working with Parks Canada, ATCO, and Canadian National Railways in this coming project. Other than that, as I indicated, you have the report, and if there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you, Mr. Van Tighem. Councillor Demota.
Thank you, Mr. Van Tighem, for your report. It's always concise and easy to follow, and I appreciate the follow-up. I just wanted to ask, I noticed that in the community for a little while there, we had a bunch of fine lads from the fire department in High Level and in town, and in running into them on several occasions, they said that they were here helping do some training. And I was just looking through your report there, and I just wanted to understand their involvement a little more. They seem to be like a good crew of guys, and they really like being here.
Thank you, Councillor Demota. Yes, there are 4 members of the high-level fire department, including the fire chief, who are certified trainers for the S215 course, which is the Fire Operations in the Wildland Urban Interface training course. So in the past, we've undertaken this course locally, and we've also gone to Hinton to the Forestry School to attend the course, as well as other places. And this time around, what we did is we brought in the high-level crew. They have extensive experience in S215 training, which basically involves structural protection, so setting up the sprinklers and the hose lines and the pump system, whatnot. And they were here for 3 days, did a tremendous job, and we're happy to have them. And yeah, that's basically what that was. That's the sprinkler trainers from High Level.
It's great, and that's great that you're upgrading your firefighters with that experience, and definitely the right time to do so. So thank you very much for that proactive initiative.
Yeah, that actually was planned somewhat earlier this year. As you can well imagine, it was postponed due to the COVID situation. So we were able to get it through, which was very fortunate. A little late in the fire season, but yes, we did get it done. And I apologize, my phone just kind of went weird on me. I got a phone call coming in, and I'm not sure if you were hearing me or not, but I'm assuming you did.
Loud and clear.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Van Tighem? It appears not, Mr. Van Tighem, so thank you. And I wanted to thank you in particular for giving me some amusement as I read my budget documents, as I contemplated what you meant by a response to a semi-fire. Could that be a fire that's not yet a fire, just a little spark, contemplated fire? Anyway, I think I did figure it out.
You're
But
very,
thanks for the amusement.
you're very astute in picking that out, because our Fire Pro program does label tractor trailer fires as semi-fires. And every time I see that, I change it to tractor trailer. But that one got away.
Well, thank you for your report and for your time. And if your phone is ringing, it might be important. So we will certainly relieve you of your presence virtually here today. But thank you for your report.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, Council. It's actually the dental clinic trying to get a hold of me. So that's very important. Thank you.
That too, yes. We can move then to agenda item 7, information reports, investing in Canada infrastructure program. Mr. Furcho, are you presenting that?
Thank you, Your Worship. Our Director of Finance will be presenting on this one. Tash, you go ahead. Just one moment, please, Your Worship. We're just having a mute issue here. Just one sec.
Yeah, you get a $3 million thing on it.
Your Worship, can we just move to the next one? We'll come back to this one.
Yes, we can do that. Thank you. We'll move to agenda item 8. 8.1 is simply a bylaw summary for review. 8.2, CMHC borrowing bylaw is before us for third reading. Certification from Parks Canada having been obtained. There are no changes to the bylaw, of course, since second reading. I'd have a motion, please, from someone to read bylaw number 222 for a third and final time. Councillor Butler, thank you. I have a motion then from Councillor Butler that Council read for the third and final time bylaw number 222, CMHC borrowing bylaw 2020, being a bylaw of the municipality of Jasper in the province of Alberta, to authorize the council of the municipality to incur indebtedness to the Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation, CMHC, seed loan in the amount of $100,000 for the purpose of construction of 80 affordable housing units, and to authorize council to repay the indebtedness in either annual or semi-annual installments. Anyone wish to speak to the motion? Okay. No debate. You're ready for the question? All in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. Thank you. I think the significance of that particular lending was commented upon at our last meeting, and of course remains equally true. Mr. Furcho, are we able at this point to return to agenda item 7.1?
Your worship, we'll give it a shot here. We've just tried to re-log in. Tash, do you try? See if that works. I think it's on your end. We're just going to have her talk through my cell phone here if this will work. No. Is it that thing that's messing us up?
Can she call in on Zoom?
No, she can't.
Try something else.
No, it's not going to work. Can't do it.
She can't just sign into Zoom. Is that what she's
The account's not working for some reason. Yeah. Your worship, we're having some issues with this one. Can we just move on to commercial cardboard, and the director of operations standing by?
All right, the intent is still to return to 7.1 when we're able? If
Yes,
we're able.
we'll keep working on it here.
Okay. Thank you. All right, we'll turn then to agenda item 9, request for decision. We can start with 9.1, commercial cardboard. And I take it that Mr. Greathead is available to speak to this.
Good morning, good afternoon, Your Worship and Council. Yes, I believe that we've had some good discussions so far on this topic. I'm trying to make some headway. The report there's numerous options, and I saw that Council had quite a good discussion, so I don't know if I have anything actually more to add to the RFD at this point, but I'm available for any questions or any concerns that need to be addressed.
Thank you, Mr. Greathead. Questions from councilors? Councilor Demota?
Thank you. Just for the rest of council and Mr. Greathead and administrative's knowledge, I try to contact as many people in the industry that I knew that were either owners or managers of businesses, and got quite a bit of feedback and constructive feedback. There are some concerns with residential users that share alleys with commercial users in the amount of cardboard that's coming in through our mail system. And there's also a concern with the amount of volume and the ability for businesses to manage taking cardboard to the depot on their own. So there is the understanding that there is going to be a cost to cardboard pickup if we decide to continue in that direction. Everybody that I contacted at least understands the history and how we got to the point that we've got to, and no one's blaming business at this point, because there's a lot of factors that have been involved, including communication, and then the loss of our environmental stewardship coordinator. So to make it short, overall, the feedback seems to be that some type of hybrid between the haul all bins and commercial collective cages in the alleys for businesses might be the best possible solution for many people. It sounds like people that need it are willing to pay, but then there's also the inevitability of residential users just throwing random boxes next to dumpsters thinking that they're going to get picked up. So there's a gap in the messaging, I think, that we're going to need to address. But I think that there's still some work to do to work collaboratively with the commercial district and the business community in getting some sort of comprehensive solution. The biggest thing that I heard was that businesses don't think that a multitude of the haul all bins with the narrow-sized cardboard slots are going to be the best solution, because we won't be able to get as many of them into the alleys that we need to deal with the situation. And some businesses have a collection area which up to 20 businesses use, I think, from what I was told by a user. So there are some gaps and there's some issues to look at, but I think that if we work with the business community, we can come up with a really good solution for everyone.
Councillor Chernow?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I do work with cardboard, and I've been observing for a long time, been working with it for decades. And I appreciate the report that Mr. Greathead has provided to us today, but I see the first three items in the recommendations are unworkable. So the first and foremost should be the fourth item. And the first item in there would be education, communication. Regardless of which system we go to, we have to get people, users, businesses to collapse cardboard and compact it at the source. If we get a haul all, we're still going to have, unless we get the boxes collapsed, we still have the same problem. They're just going to get piled up in the alley. So first thing is to get people to collapse, compact, parcel into boxes, and stack neatly. And I have spoken to our operators that pick up the stuff, and he says, if that was done this way, it would be great. And then it's gathered by us, taken to a spot when they're ready to receive it. Otherwise, if you ask the people to take it over there, our users will take it at 9 o'clock at night, which is not practical for us. So I think that the first thing would be a good piece of education, communication. I think where people collapse and neatly put away their cardboard and work there before we move to other things. Cardboard was part of the garbage years ago. We tried to remove it because it was taking up a lot of volume. This is where we're at. So the customers, users, businesses still see it as garbage, and they still see it's a responsibility to pick it up. So the other thing about these bins is these cardboard enclosures, they're communal. So for us to think that we're going to find somebody, there's probably 6 or 8, and in one case, 20 users. There's also residential that uses it. So I just think that we should be looking at, I'm sorry to be so long, but education first. Thanks.
Other comments from councillors? Councillor McGrath?
Thank you, Mayor Ireland. I agree that it's time to move forward, and I thank Mr. Greathead for the preparation of this document and this report. It's really well put together, and it's time that we move forward with the tidiness of the cardboard situation in our town. My question would be regarding the third point and what an approved receptacle would be. I fully agree that we should be moving in a place where council is directing administration that municipal pickup must be flattened, or it will be subject to a fine. And I do oppose Councillor Journeau in the thought that I believe fines are needed in this situation, and that's pretty opposite the way I think most of the time, but it's an ongoing concern, and it's a concern that's been in our untidy alleys for years now. The approved receptacle would be my question of how would a business go about getting an approved receptacle, or if their cardboard is tightly broken down inside another box, is that enough?
Mr. Don, are you going to answer that for Mr. Greathead, or in addition to?
If Mr. Greathead wants to go forward, it's a bylaw question. The definition of approved receptacle is why I chimed in, but Mr. Greathead, if you would like.
For our purposes, we'd want a haul container, just so that the boxes are flattened. That's the only way to get them in there and leave them there, and then that will increase the capacity of our vehicles. So sometimes when these boxes are getting crushed and staff is out there, like it wouldn't be uncommon to see that we're driving around hauling 60 pounds of material. It's just really we're just carrying air around. So I would like to go with that. Now, having said that, there's a cost that comes with those, and I haven't got a quote on them actually, but we'd expect them to be about $4,000 to $5,000 per bin. Some of the larger haul garbage bins are running $10,000 to $14,000.
Thank you, Mr. Greathead. I will go first to Ms. Nadon, who wanted to answer specifically the question about what is an approved receptacle. Go ahead, please.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship, and perhaps offer a bit of clarification around the different bullets that are in the recommendation here. So to Councillor McGrath's question, an approved receptacle in the context that it's presented in the report here applies to garbage. So that bullet specifically is fines under the solid waste bylaw may apply to an owner who fails to deposit garbage in an approved receptacle. So that would be, this does not require a council motion to enact. So essentially, if there's garbage in the recycling areas, we could pursue issuing fines through the solid waste bylaw, and any garbage that is not in a garbage bin, which is an approved receptacle, would qualify to be subject to a fine, I guess. And the request before council today is to deem that cardboard that is not flattened is unsightly or untidy under the nuisance bylaw. So in order for us to go out and enforce, so again, it's the discussion around communication, or whether we want that communication to be possibly backed up by enforcement, is the tool we're asking for at this time. And the direct and immediate outcome would be that people would have to flatten their cardboard. What kind of system we go to later on, whether it's bins, whether we stop pickup, or whether we define other areas where the cardboard can go, there's budget implications to those steps, and that is a discussion that council is welcome to entertain today. But the request for decision today is about deeming that cardboard that is not flattened will be considered a nuisance under the nuisance bylaw, and therefore subject to fines. So under administration's recommendation on this item are the two first bullets. That's the motions that we would require today that would allow us to potentially enforce if people are not flattening their cardboard.
Thank you for that. I will first go back to Councillor McGrath if she had any follow-up.
No follow-up. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Then Councillor Wilson and Councillor Butler.
Oh, there we go. Good to go. I'm in support of option 5, and that's to suspend the pickup service. We are in this business currently because of service creep. I don't think it's the municipality's role
to be in cardboard pickup. I think it's gonna be very arduous to come up with the proper solutions to this issue. And I think the private industry will find those solutions way quicker than government. We're giving quite a big heads up to business owners and to prospective contractors. I think we just cut the service and we let business unfold, and the solutions will be numerous. And if we're talking about, how do we find people, if they don't break down their boxes, well, the businesses or the contractor would just charge a larger price for unpackaged or unbroken down boxes. And if you break down your boxes, you get a certain rate. If they're not broken down, you get a larger rate. And the hours of pickup and all of that will fall into place. We'll still accept it. We're still a partner in the process, but I think this is private business, and bring it to us when you've gotten it picked up, and we'll assist in the disposal of it. But I don't think we should be in the alleys daily dealing with this issue.
Councillor Butler?
Thank you very much. I agree with everything that Councillor Wilson just said. I would add one more point. While I'm not necessarily against the municipality being involved in collecting cardboard in future on some kind of fee for service basis, as Councillor Wilson said, private business is likely to find solutions more quickly and easily than we would. And I would add that almost certainly I think that the municipality's costs to collect cardboard, if we really did apply and pass on our costs, would be higher than the costs that any business would face in finding their own solution. So as I've said before, we don't collect used frying fat, we don't collect plastic items. We should stop collecting cardboard as of 2021. However, before that, the motion that is recommended today and that I am also in favor of, and this has to happen first, and the recommendation is that this be the first two bullets under the recommendation on the RFD in front of us be implemented immediately, is that council deem that commercial cardboard must be flattened or it's considered untidy and unsightly, and we have to do that. We have to determine that designation in order for the bylaw department to act appropriately. So I'm in favor of that, doing that now. And that we just make the statement that we expect that cardboard collection sites be kept in reasonable condition or there will be fines. So I'm certainly prepared to make the motion as recommended. And the wording is in front of us, the first two bullet points on page 1 of the RFD. And then the question of what we would do further down the road, as Councillor Wilson suggested, would be a separate question. So I'll make that motion. Thank you.
I have a motion then before us that council deem that commercial cardboard placed in storage areas for municipal pickup must be flattened or it will be considered untidy or unsightly under the nuisance bylaw, bylaw number 046, and may be subject to fines as defined in the bylaw. And secondly, that council deem that commercial cardboard storage areas for municipal pickup must be kept in reasonable condition or they may be deemed untidy or unsightly under the nuisance bylaw number 046 and may be subject to fines as defined in the bylaw. Debate on the motion, Councillor Demota.
Thank you. I've been working in the commercial sector downtown, as we call downtown Jasper, for many businesses, including running a few of my own, over 25 years. I understand from the operator's perspective the type of stress that this might cause on some businesses. So on behalf of them and understanding the process a little more thoroughly, I can't vote in favor of this as it stands. Back initially when this initiative was started, Parks Canada, working with the municipality, was requiring that any cardboard storage in alleys by businesses were required to have bins to keep these boxes from blowing around, causing fire hazards, and for being unsightly. And it started out where businesses bought in, and some of them took care of doing that. And then somehow management changed and different processes took place within our systems, and that was no longer being forced or even scrutinized. So then we had partial buy-in, and then it kind of fell apart. So now we have like a half and half system here. What's happening currently is that businesses and residents and other people are dropping off boxes next to garbage bins. So even when we're going to collect garbage, all these boxes are flying around all over the place. So I think that they're in the area or the time that businesses still have to gather, break down their boxes, they should be caging them in a certain area or keeping them tidy so that regardless if they're broken down, they're still going to get blown, and other things can happen with them in the alley. So I think it's not tight enough as a thing. And then, you know, in contacting 40 or so businesses, and the feedback that I've been getting is that it's going to be very hard to enforce who's putting what boxes where, whether they're broken down or not. It will be very hard to identify whose box belongs to who, particularly if they're blowing down the alley or not being taken care of in a proper manner. If you go and walk through the business district down in the back alleys and take some time, drive around, go from area to area, you'll find that it'll be very difficult for us to enforce this type of method. So I am not in favor of, I'm in favor of communicating and working with commercial businesses to help come up with a solution. I'm not in favor of enforcing and going ahead with this motion as it is. We have to do a better job, and I don't think that this is tight enough.
I am certainly inclined to support the motion. I think it is necessary, and the request for decision, I think, is abundantly clear that even though administration is asking that council deem unflattened cardboard to be untidy and unsightly and subject to fines, it is also clear that even those recommendations are intended to be the subject of education, communication, and compliance first, and enforcement later. And that has always been the practice that our staff has carried forward. And I have no reason to expect that won't be the case, but they need some kind of backup. And we just had recent experience with masking where the softer educational approach proved to be ineffective. This matter has been before us and before the public for a number of weeks. There has been ample opportunity for people to start changing their ways, and I have seen very little evidence that anybody is interested. So I think that we need to pass the motion, deem cardboard that is unflattened to be untidy and unsightly and subject to fines, and have that as part of the educational message, with the added specter that perhaps the service will disappear entirely. Now, that's not before us today for debate, and I think there might be arguments to be made that the municipality should, in some sense, maintain this service. I'm not yet satisfied that the public sector will step up, and we will still have an issue of unsightly cardboard in our alleyways. And yes, there may be some overlap with residential, but I can think of strictly commercial laneways where there is not a residential component, at least not an obvious one, where the problem is not being addressed in any way. So I fully support what administration has brought forward. I thank you, Mr. Greathead, and your staff for what I consider to be an excellent report and recommendations. And I note that in the background material, you indicate that in addition to the specific recommendations, you have indicated that with direction from council, administration could engage with the business community to determine sort of a long-term solution. And I endorse that as well. It's not part of the motion, but once we conclude with the motion, I absolutely agree that more work with the commercial sector will be beneficial to everybody. But in the meantime, I think we have to say that we're serious about cardboard blowing up and down our commercial laneways. And for that reason, I am in support of the motion. Councillor Journeau.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I do support as well. However, I see that it's going to be a first step towards the education, which is what is needed. So I support this in that sense, that education will be the key in cardboard. So whether we pass it on to a private or continue ourselves, even if we put a cardboard bin, like on Tuesdays and Wednesdays when it's delivery date, one bin will not suffice. There'll still be lots of cardboard being spread all over the place. Like today, for example, maybe administration should know that, but they're going to make 2 cardboard pickups in the back of our alley because there's that much cardboard. So if you just have the one bin, cardboard's still going to be all over the place. So yes, I support this because it's going to be an education piece.
Councillor Devoto.
I agree with everything that you and Councillor Journeau has said, and through you to Mr. Greathead and his team and administration. I appreciate all the work that's gone behind this, and the options are great. There's a lot to discuss, and I do appreciate having that piece in there with working with the commercial community and coming up with some sort of future plans. But having said that, I think that we should have still taken another step forward and work towards getting it even tidier than what we're requesting. But if that's going to be part of the plan, I can be in favor of this. I'm semi-convinced, but I'm not in favor of going in and finding people because I don't think that that's a necessary step right now, and it could be at a later date. But I think working with the community first and then having that there, that's why I can't fully support it, because that part of the movement is incorporated in that.
Is there anything else from any councillor? Are you ready for the question? Councillor Butler?
Thank you. I honestly have to say I'm amazed that there is any opposition at all to what is just a no-brainer. If we don't do this, we're saying that it's okay for a business proprietor to open their back door and fling a cardboard box out into the alley to be picked up and blown around the wind, and that's just okay. Of course it's not okay. This is just the simplest, easiest requirement that anyone should expect of any local business. If they're not already doing it, it's because they don't care. All of the communication concerns are what we have been doing, will continue to do, and will do. I know the bylaw department isn't going to just first off march up and find someone. Of course they're going to issue warnings and communicate. That's part of it. So I am amazed to hear, honestly, any opposition to saying it's not okay to litter in the back alleys. So I hope that this will receive full support and pass. Thank you.
I will take that as closing argument on the debate. It was Councillor Butler's motion to open and to close, both of which he did. So if you're ready for the question, I shall call the question. All in favor? Opposed? That motion is carried. Unopposed. Mr. Furcho, is it possible to return to agenda 7.1 or should we proceed with 9.2?
Your worship, we're just going to take a test right now. Tash, give it a shot. I just sent you a text.
Test, am I working now?
Yeah, we're good. Thanks. So go ahead now.
Thank you, Mr. Furcho. Good afternoon, Your Worship and Council. I apologize for that. It was giving me grief last week as well, so I'll have to see what IT can do for me. I'm not sure. I've been doing the same thing for months, but this information report coincides with the news release that was published on August 28th by the municipality. This is to announce that Jasper has been approved under the Investing in Canada Infrastructure Program in the amount of $3,665. In order for this application to be approved, there had been a cost sharing associated. Therefore, the ICIP federal program contributes 40% of eligible project costs. The other 33% or $3 million was applied for and approved through the Municipal Sustainability Program, through the capital portion of the MSI program. And the Curling Club also donated nearly 300,000 that they secured through the CFEP grant, which is the Canadian Facility Enhancement Program grant. And so that leaves the municipality reserves and debentures to contribute to the rest of eligible project costs, which equates to just over $2 million. The application was applied for 2 years ago, and there were some revisions that had to occur during this time to just come in with projects at $9 million in the application in the very end. This ultimately is really great news for the municipality as it reduces the debenture applications going forward into the next few years. So this is great news for the municipality. We have lots of extra cash flow to support the renovation process that we are in amidst right now. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that, Mrs. Belichick. Any questions, comments from councillors? Councillor Journeau?
Comment only. This is great news. You saw in the distribution, not every community got it. So we applied. Good work by administration to lead the way, apply early. And this is just superb news in our plans and moving towards improving our facilities. This is, and thanks again to the staff for that.
Thank you, Councillor Journeau. Councillor McGrath?
Thank you, Mayor Ireland. I fully agree and can echo what Councillor Journeau expressed. Thank you very much to administration and congratulations specifically to Ms. Malinchuk for all of the hard work that went into this over the last 2 years for this successful application to be received. We are very grateful on behalf of our entire community. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Councillor Butler?
Thank you, Mrs. Malinchuk. I have a couple of questions. You mentioned that this would reduce our debenture requirements. Does it reduce or have an impact on the debenture that we have already undertaken? So we've already gone out and borrowed some money for the activity center upgrades. Did that borrowing anticipate this funding or did it not? That's my first question.
Your Worship, through to Councillor Butler. No, it would not affect the current borrowing situation. That money has been received and it has been a factor the entire time as I knew the application was submitted. However, I was always planning for worst case scenario where we might not receive the funding. So looking forward into the future, I was anticipating that maybe we wouldn't receive the funding. So I was planning on potentially a lot more in debenture applications or pulling from reserves and whatnot. So this is affecting the forward movement in the projects because I had to secure what we needed for last year and going into this year. So that's how it's worked out.
Go ahead, Councillor Butler.
Thank you, and I will have, if that's all right, this and one more follow-up. So, thank you. Understanding that, looking at for example, the slab and boards and brine lines, which of course is work that we have already committed to in our undertaking and that we borrowed for, given that we ourselves have already funded that work, can we still benefit from the portion of this grant that would have applied to that work? Because I understand that there are stipulations around applying this grant to work that would not otherwise proceed. So can you comment on that?
Sorry, may you clarify on grant work that would normally not proceed? Is that what you said?
Well, I'll try rephrasing the question. So we received some money, some of which $5.6 million, for example, applies to, among other things, slabs, boards, and refrigeration. So I assume some amount of grant, of the grant, applied toward that specific project indicated under the first bullet there. But we're doing that work anyway. We've now funded it ourselves. Do we have assurance that we can still nonetheless receive any grant money that would have been dedicated to that portion of the project?
Right, Your Worship, through to Councillor Butler. So still working through the very beginnings of the contract with the federal government on all of that. So I have to, it's been part of the accepted project. So it is on the list. And it's very, it's still a very, we haven't, not many expenditures have been incurred as of yet. So don't know how to explain that. So basically we have to work through with the federal government a bit more on the process, but it's begun and we just need to sign off on a bit more paperwork and whatnot. So those are the projects that have been applied for, but also there was also $1 million that was secured through the federal government through the gas tax which was not noted in this report because it was separate, for the curling rink, or sorry, the ice rink, the plant, the refrigeration plant. Sorry, I was having a hard time figuring out my words there. So it is part and parcel of the full application that was put in for just over $9 million.
Okay, thank you. I will have one more question, but you could come back to me if you prefer.
I will do that. Councillor DeMona?
Great job. Thank you very much. I appreciate the proactive approach on this and how aggressive we were right off the beginning. And just for further clarification, so out of the 9.2 million proposed, we'll be receiving 3.6 plus million to compensate. So it'll be less than 9.2 million to complete all those projects.
Your Worship, through to Councillor DeMota. Yes, so basically we are looking at the municipality contributing just over 2 million out of the 9 million, 9.2 million.
Thank you.
Just before I return to Councillor Butler, I too want to extend my thanks and appreciation to everyone. It's interesting that this particular initiative took life when this council was about 1 month into its term, and it is just now concluding. So I thank you for both the effort and the foresight to get this started almost 3 years ago, and carry it through to today. And thanks as well to the Jasper Curling Club, because without the contribution through the CFEP funds that we had to match, this couldn't have got started. I understand that a year or so ago, we received a commitment to some municipal sustainability initiative funding from the province, which reduced the amount, and now this most recent federal contribution. And it all works out to huge advantage to the community. So I thank you, Mrs. Melanchuk, together with those people at the Curling Club. And I know that our Director of Culture and Recreation, Mrs. McNabb, was also extensively involved. So I extend thanks and credit to her as well. And I see in the background information that you worked alongside a contracted grant writer. That seems to me to have been money very well spent. And again, congratulations on both the initiative and the foresight for that, because it certainly paid dividends. So I thank you for all of that. And hopefully that gave Mr. Butler time to formulate his next question.
Thank you, Your Worship. It's written down. My last question is, of the work that is included in this grant application, how much of that work has been already approved by council under previous capital budget allocations, and how much of it has yet to be approved by council?
Bringing up the 2020 capital, there's other things that are listed as well within the year. So of them, there are a few that are approved, and then going into the 2021 year is where most of the projects would occur. So this would be, and they were brought to council for approval for the 2020 year, but with the pandemic, council then reallocated them forward. So I moved them forward into the 2021 year, and whether or not they're approved within the 2021 year, or if they are changed around to other years. But at the moment, for this upcoming budget presentation, it sits the majority of the projects coming forward to be approved for this grant program.
Sure, go ahead, Councillor Butler.
Thank you. So I understand that some of this work has already been approved, and some you would anticipate coming during the 2021 capital requisition. So I wonder if it's reasonable to ask, if it is the will of council, to see in the next few weeks perhaps a little further breakdown of that list that we're looking at here, where it says key work to occur, where we could understand the difference between the work that we have already given the go-ahead to and work that we have either pushed off to 2021 or perhaps has not yet been requested. And I will point to one item that causes me in particular to query this, and that is that in the notification that we received, there's a reference to an elevator. And I don't actually recall, I could just have forgotten, but I don't recall that an elevator was part of what we had looked at. So it makes me wonder, is there work here that hasn't yet even been requested or asked for approval? Or has it all at least come before council for approval? And I wonder if a breakdown like that is something council would like to see when you have time to prepare
it. Your worship, through to Councillor Butler, if it is the wish of council, I can bring that forward. The elevator itself, as mentioned, was part and parcel of what was listed on the 2021 capital budget to increase accessibility within the activity center. It wasn't listed as an elevator itself, but it's the one that the line item that it's suggested under is the increased accessibility for the $178,000, and it's in the budget package that was presented in November of 2019. But yes, I can do that if it's the wish of council. Thank you.
And may I ask, is that the wish of council? It appears that that is the wish of council. I don't know what that entails for you, Mrs. Malinchuk, and perhaps you could give us a sense. I appreciate there is much going on in every department, yours in particular, perhaps. So I don't think it's the intent of council to overwhelm you or rush you to something. But if you could just give us a fair assessment of what might be involved and when that might, on a very reasonable timeline, be ready for us. I think that's all that council is requesting.
Your worship, it is part and parcel of the plan going forward, so it's already sitting there. I would just have to compile it to put it into a format that presents to council in the request format.
Thank you very much for that. Appreciate it. All right, that I think concludes agenda item 7.1. Again, thanks to all. We can now return, although before we return to agenda item 9.2, it occurred to me that we left one item outstanding with respect to 9.1. And with the consent of council, I would like to return to the cardboard, commercial cardboard issue, and only to focus on what is not exactly a request for decision in the document, but is found in the background information, and that is the statement: with direction from council, administration could engage with the business community to determine which option would be more palatable for users. And with the addition to that sentence, would be palatable to the municipality and to users, might be part of that. But I would certainly like to give that direction to administration to continue to engage with the business community to determine a long-term solution to the issue of, well, I hate to say commercial cardboard because it's just cardboard as far as I'm concerned. But in any event, I think it is a worthwhile task to undertake. It doesn't mean that council is committed to maintaining the service if we can't find an option that we consider to be viable. But I certainly think that with the good work that Mr. Greathead has already done, there is every reason to believe that he might be successful with continued engagement. And I would personally be quite prepared to give that direction on our behalf, that he continue with that. Councillor Juneau, Councillor Demota, Councillor Butler. Yes.
Thank you. I agree with what I think you're saying, with only one concern. If administration engages with users to determine which option would be more palatable to users, I have no doubt that what would be most palatable to users is status quo. This is one of the reasons I think that Councillor Wilson and I have sort of been suggesting that we need to clearly let the community know, if it is indeed our will, that we would intend to suspend commercial cardboard pickup in the new year. So I still think that consideration of whether council would like administration to continue or suspend that service is something that we should do. Otherwise, quite obviously, that would be the preference of users. So if administration goes out and clears users only to find out that everyone's will is that we should continue without charging, doing what we're doing, then that wouldn't help us very much.
I agree. And when I spoke, I intended to say it would have to be palatable to council as well. That's why I fully agree. And I don't mean to, at this stage or at any time, deprive council of its options. And I think that the option to suspend the service entirely is still before us. But in the meantime, if discussions happen, it may be for the better. Ms. Nadong.
Thank you, Your Worship, for circling back on this item. The other part that's left sort of unaddressed is how and when council wishes to proceed through the options discussion, which is in itself tied to the engagement discussion. So whether council would wish to determine a bit closer what the options that are actually on the table are, and then administration could go and engage with the business community, or if you would like us to go in broadly, and then it sort of sends the message that there could be any and all options considered. So the scope of the engagement is based on how we will proceed through that decision. And as I've mentioned earlier, part of this will have some budgetary implications depending on which option council chooses to move forward with. And just in a general sense, when do you expect to see this back on a committee meeting agenda? Is there a timeline that makes more sense or not? Or sort of having that type of discussion is the other item that was sort of left unaddressed when we wrapped up that item.
Thank you for that. Again, just a personal preference. I would say the only option not on the table is the status quo. So there is going to be a change. I think that has to be acknowledged. And even though there is some resistance, it's not to a change, it's just the way we get to that change. So apart from eliminating the status quo, I would be personally content to leave the field wide open. Who knows what the private sector may have as ideas that we would not think of. So I don't want to limit it at all, but see what administration can come up with that actually works for the municipality and for the department, would solve the problem and would find some level of support from the commercial sector. If council prefers, though, we could certainly take it back to committee of the whole and narrow the options. Certainly open to that. Thoughts? I think I'm getting a sense, leave it as open as possible. That Councillor Demoto?
Yeah, and not to get back into the debate, but that's one of the reasons why I had trouble supporting is because we didn't have a plan. And if we're going to develop one, I'm all in support of engaging with the business community to come up with a proper solution. So I really liked everything that you said, and I am in support of the actual idea behind it. I would just like to have a better plan, and I think working together is the right solution.
Does that give you sufficient direction, Mr. Don?
It does, to an extent. Thank you, Your Worship. I would suggest that we would have to confer internally between our Director of Finance for timelines on budget and our Director of Operations to better understand the implications and timelines again, and we can return to council. I can't promise for which meeting, but we certainly can continue to work on this internally.
Thank you. All right, well, thank you for allowing me to close what I thought was an open loop on that. Agenda item 9.2, we have request for decision with respect to, well, my agenda is different than my agenda. So which one do we want to start with? It says, my paper agenda says, there we go, fitness center. Go ahead, Mr. Purcell.
All right, thank you, Your Worship, and I'll ask our Director of Culture and Rec to speak on this one. Yvonne, if you could, please.
Good day, Your Worship and councillors. This is with regards to the reopening of the fitness center. It came for notice on June 30th, and discussion has taken place on July 7th and 21st. Decision date requested for September 1st. The recommendation has changed since the June 30th proposal, and why it's changed is because now we're looking at a September 21st request for opening, whereas the last one was for a July opening. So the recommendation is that council approve an additional net deficit of $97,000 instead of $153,000 to reopen the fitness center starting September 21st with reduced hours, pending staff availability and training. Options remain the same, so direct administration to provide cost estimates for a different opening date, defer making a decision on this term, or deny the request to reopen the fitness center in 2020. All of the above options would affect the aquatic center reopening approved budget. Details are provided under the background information below, which I'll get to. The next change on this request was the demand for service. So staff are fielding requests for service on a daily basis, and that's something that we started recording in June 2020. We've received so far 178 calls that we've actually connected with, and that represented 590 users that are requesting access to our facilities. And that's all of the facilities. We didn't itemize them in particular because a lot of people said they wanted to come use the fitness center and have a shower, or use the pool and have a shower. So it's just trying to access our facilities. With regards to the background, the changes made in that portion was, as outlined in the recommendations above, to the cost of reopening the facility with reduced hours until the end of 2020 is estimated to increase the net deficit in the amount of $97,000 and would require a council resolution to authorize. The previous request for decision on reopening the fitness center dated June 30th was proposed as the first step to reopening the facility, the fitness center, and then the aquatic center, and included funding for the manager, clerking, and custodial hours. On July 21st, council approved the reopening of the aquatic center. The approval amount, $115,000, was based on the fitness center already being open. Therefore, if the request to reopen the fitness center at the same time as the aquatic center on September 21st is denied, additional funding will be required to cover the clerking and custodial expenses to reopen the aquatic center. These additional clerking and custodial expenses do amount to the funding required to reopen the fitness center, as outlined in the recommendation of $97,000. Employee callback for the aquatic center has resulted in 2 valued employees, 1 full-time and 1 part-time, declining the recall due to reduced hours or alternative shifts. Changes in staffing will require additional postings, hiring, and training at this time. So we're hoping that we don't have too many of those, because that's very time-consuming in trying to reopen our facilities. If you have any questions, Council, Mayor.
Thank you, Mrs. McNabb, for that. Councillor Wilson.
Hi, Mrs. McNabb. My question is reduced hours, and are we committed to reduced hours until 2021, or have you guys looked at ramping up service as we reopen? I'm just, and I've spoken to this before, but I'm concerned about the demand for service with reduced hours. I don't think we should be limiting well, sorry, I'm going back there. I feel we should be offering as many hours as operating as possible to diminish the demand per hour of the day, I guess, is what I'm trying to get out. But I've spoken to it before. Have you looked into opening up more time slots throughout the rest of 2020, or are we kind of handcuffed until a new budget comes out?
Your worship, through to Councillor Wilson. I do not have those numbers right now. I do have that in the second request for decision for the activity center, because that was when your question was brought up, was with regards to the activity center. So I didn't adjust it for the fitness center request, but I do have that in an option in the activity center reopening, is that we do take into account regular hours of where we are. And if that is the will of council, then yes, absolutely, we can get you those numbers.
Go ahead, Councillor Wilson.
Just to follow up, but off the top of your head, or if we were to open up to normal hours pre-COVID, so that would be probably 7 o'clock through till 9 o'clock, or somewhere in that ballpark. How many more staffing positions are you looking at?
Well, off the top of my head, for staffing positions, the positions right now have been reduced in hours. So their hours were only looking at half-time or three-quarter time, depending on the position that they were in. Off the top of my head, I would say we're probably looking at about 4 positions that would go back to their regular hours. So that could be full-time, or it could be part-time, but it would be with the hours that they had pre-COVID.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Demota.
I'm glad that you brought that up, Councillor Wilson, because I think, looking at different motions here and proposals, that there are some hours indicated in one and not the other. And I don't want to get into the minutia of all that. When council voted on the reduction in our overall taxes this year, there was money put aside to go towards reserves. And some of the intent, I believe, was that if we needed to open up other services and move forward with them, we had a little bit of a cushion. Although I know that we're running lean in many areas, I think the intent was there to see what we could do to assist in some service provision. And although we don't have the hours of operation here, I'm kind of hoping that if there's, once we open up, hopefully we open up, I'm hoping that we open up as soon as possible, particularly for the fitness center, because I think it'll provide a lot of opportunity for people to engage in some physical activity, as far as, and mental and social is important as well. So I hope that if we're not stuck to certain things, if we're passing something here, and if there's greater demand and workability around some hours, I hope that we can come back to the table and expand on that and open up more or full. But I think if the demand is there right off the bat, then maybe we should consider opening up to full-time hours, particularly that it's getting colder outside and more people are anxious to get indoors, and also the fact that we're going to have different protocols in place for social distancing and protecting ourselves in those environments. It may lead to opening up for greater hours to get more people through through the system. So I'm open into expanding further thought in that area.
Councillor Chernow.
Thank you. I support the reopening as presented. I appreciate the discussions on opening full-time, but I also support the recommendation or the suggestion by Dr. Hinshaw from Alberta Health let's strongly suggest that you open in small ways, give it a period of time, and then move forward. So I see this as an excellent way. September 21st is first day of fall. We've always talked about that date being the reopen date, and I support the reopening as presented. And if 3 weeks later everything goes well, then we can look at further hours. But I supported the proposal as presented. Thank you.
Councillor McGrath.
I too support the motion that's in front of us today to reopen the activity center on September 20, or sorry, the fitness center on September 21st with the net deficit of 70, sorry, my numbers just went away from me. $97,000, I believe it was. And as other councillors suggested, if there is demand for service and we feel comfortable and confident that we can expand hours and provide more service to the community, I would certainly like to see that before us as well. Thank you.
Councillor Butler.
Thank you. I'm also in support. We said we would consider reopening on the 21st, subject to how we found that the COVID situation was progressing. And I don't think there's really been any reason that has surfaced that we should not go forward. We've asked administration to come back with a budget based on their sense of sort of minimal acceptable operations, and I think that's what we've got. I think we should accept the recommendation as provided. I've spoken quite a bit in the past about the need to wait and about fiscal concerns. And I want to point out that in the Culture and Recreation Department, in a good year, under the best possible circumstances, the best we managed to do is operate with a net operating deficit of $2.5 million in the department in a good year. We normally anticipate $1.25 or $1.3 million in revenues. $250,000 or so of that in a good year comes from the arena. $500,000 or more of that in a good year comes from the Fitness and Aquatic Center. And I think we need to keep in our minds that almost all of that, well, that might be an exaggeration, but a great deal of that income is simply lost this year because of COVID. And so we have to plan responsibly. So a slow opening, a staged opening, and constant consideration of where the money is going to come from is an important part of our responsibility here. So I think we have to be satisfied that the recommendations we've received thus far on reopening these facilities do represent really the minimal possible approach. But it's worth remembering that already with this reopening, and depending on what we decide to do with respect to the activity center, we have allocated $375,000 of additional budget this year because of COVID. Whether it's additional cleaning for bathrooms or additional requirements here and there. We allocated $100,000, and it was the right decision, to reopening the daycare because of COVID. And the taxpayers are footing the bill for all of this, whether they are users of these facilities or not. So I am in support, but I want to remind council and the community that we do have a responsibility to watch where the money's going, which is, I think, what we're doing, and I support, but let's not forget that responsibility. Thank you.
Councillor DeMota.
I just wanted to say that I appreciate Councillor Butler's comments, and I'm glad someone's keeping track.
I too am in favor of the recommendation. There's not yet a motion, but I suspect it's coming. But I did have one question, and it's, I suppose, mostly rhetorical, but might be something that we can consider as we move forward with budget for next year. Just because of circumstances, we are looking at the fitness center and the aquatic center as separate entities. And yet, when I was reviewing last year's budget to try and get a sense of the numbers, they are combined. It's the fitness and aquatic center, and I can find no way to break them down, and yet they're presented, as I say, because of the circumstances, as separate items. So are they separate items or are they not? If they are not, even though there is some overlap, is it possible as we develop a budget to try and allocate costs to each of those particular services? Because I found it perplexing trying to compare numbers when I couldn't segregate aquatic from fitness. So I just leave that with you. Maybe it's an impossible task, but the way it came forward really suggested that there should be a way to do that if we're going to treat the fitness center differently than the aquatic center in terms of motions to reopen. In any event, that is for another day. I am certainly prepared to support the recommendation for the reopening of the fitness center on September 21st. Councillor Demota?
I'd like to move that motion forward.
I have then a motion from Councillor Demota that council approve an initial net deficit of $97,000 to reopen the fitness center starting September 21st, 2020, with reduced hours pending staff availability and training. If there is no further debate, I will call the question. All in favor? Opposed? That motion is carried. One opposed. We can now look at agenda item 9.3, reopening of the activity center.
Your worship, thank you, and I'll ask our Director of Culture and Rec to continue presenting on this one as well. Thanks, and go ahead, Yvonne.
Thank you, Mr. Furcho. So Mayor and Council, this has come before Council on numerous occasions. So notice was provided on July 7th. Discussion occurred on July 21st, 28th, August 4th, August 11th, August 18th, and August 25th, with decision coming before you on September 1st. The recommendation is to approve an additional net deficit of $30,000 to reopen the activity center starting September 21st for local use and reduced hours, as outlined in this report, pending staff availability and training. The hours of operation right now are estimated at noon till 8, Monday to Friday, and 7 hours per day on weekends. Options are to approve an additional net deficit of $28,000 to reopen the activity center starting October 24th for local use with reduced hours. Direct administration to prepare cost estimates for reopening the activity center for September 21st or October 4th with full operating hours to promote physical distancing. Defer making a decision on this item or deny the request to reopen the facility in 2020. The only other additions on this particular request were the out of school care program was one addition that we had on under user group access, and the out of school care program will need to operate out of the activity center. They've been denied access at the school, so they will need a location to be able to operate during or in the evenings, so between 3:30 and whatever time they leave, usually about 6 or 6:30. So we definitely need space for that out of school care program. That will also need to occur on the days off, like teacher days. So there's additional and stat holidays too. So those are things that we need to look at. And with regards to the last question, I can probably elaborate it with the activity center. Is when the request came forward to council, it came forward as opening one facility or one area at a time to see how the response was and if people wanted to use the facility. So first we came forward with the fitness and aquatic center and divided it just to the fitness center to start the fitness center. Then the request came forward to the aquatic center and then the request for the activity center. So that's why it's kind of separated in the budget amounts, and that's why it's been dispersed.
Thank you, Mrs. McNabb. Questions from councillors? Councillor Journeau?
Thank you. My first question, comment is in your first page at the bottom of the presentation, you've got previous council motions on reopening facilities, but these two motions got nothing to do with the activity center. They're to do with another facility, which we discussed in the previous agenda item. So not sure why that is. My question is on the options. So I'll go to the fourth option first. Deny the request to reopen the facility in 2020. Well, I think the discussion has been in council that we'd be prepared to reopen the facility when the arena is open, which we understand is the end of October. So I'm a little perplexed by that comment. Is the arena not going to open in 2020? Question. And the other question is the fact that in the discussions that we've had, certainly in the line of thinking that I recommended, is that again, we would allow a period of 2-3 weeks after opening our facilities before moving on to the next step, which meant that we would be reopening this activity center on or about the Tuesday after Thanksgiving, which I believe is October the 12th. And not October 13th, sorry. That seems to be not mentioned. So kind of question, comment, I guess is what it is. Thank you.
Your worship, through to Councillor Journeau, the question about with regards to the request to reopen the facility in 2020 or not reopen in 2020, that item, that option has been presented on each of these. So I never changed the option. So that came forward on July 7th when we didn't know the direction of council. We've left those options the same.
Thank you, Mrs. McNabb. Councillor DeMoto?
Yeah, and just going back for some of that, the demand in service, going back to I think sometime at the beginning of August the 4th, I believe, we went out to ask the users of the facility on what works best for them, and a lot of them indicated that they wouldn't be coming back till mid-October. So I'm more for aiming towards that date, and kind of in conjunction with what Councillor Journeau said about seeing how the demand grows and go from there. But I think if no one's going to really need it until mid-October, then I don't think there's any sense right now into getting open a facility that most of the community won't benefit from.
Councillor McGrath?
Thank you, Mayor Ireland. I am in support of the motion as it's prepared by administration. The cost differential as far as fiscal responsibility is concerned was $2,000 difference from opening on September 21st to the beginning of October. And I know that many residents are looking forward to next week and this week for some children, resuming some sense of normalcy in their lives. They're attending school as of yesterday, and the other elementary school will open on Tuesday of next week and be accepting children in. We have tenants who wish to provide wellness services in the form of gymnastics and in the form of dance for a $2,000 cost differential. I am in support of allowing the activity center time to open and develop its policies and practices in preparation for hockey season beginning at the end of October.
Councillor Wilson.
Yeah, I would echo Councillor McGrath's comments there, and I think we bumped this date up to have all of our services open on a uniform date. I think October 4th was a really important date that we were trying to open up before, because that a lot of furlough positions come into play at that point. I think we bumped it forward a week. So we do it all together, and let's get our services open. We'll you know, there might be a few kind of growing opening pains, but let's just move ahead. Piecemealing it doesn't really make too much sense to me, and everybody's moving indoors here soon. Let's do it on one date. Let's, you know, give clear direction to user groups that you can start planning your programs. And I think we're going to see a few more groups come to the table. But if we're not open, and if it's kind of in limbo, then nobody's going to be approaching us, I don't think. So let's move this one forward.
Mrs. McNabb, what flexibility might there be in the proposed hours of operation? One of the things that interests me is the ability for a community center to host a local wedding, for example. But if the motion passes and incorporates the hours of operation as they appear in the recommendation, all the wedding guests are going to have to go home by 8 o'clock on Friday night. And I would rather pass something that allowed more flexibility. If our facility is open for that sort of a use, I would rather see on a Friday or Saturday night that people can actually enjoy the evening there, if that's one of the things for which we're opening. So it's a small matter, but I favor the recommendation in most respects, but I am concerned that if we approve as part of the motion the suggested hours, it really limits our ability to provide some of the services that we might otherwise provide in a community facility to our public.
Your Worship, I can answer that. Usually what happens with weddings, so we have our previous hours were 9 o'clock in the morning till 10 o'clock at night. After 10 p.m., overtime came into play with the clerk that was on duty that would work the weddings. So the same thing would happen if we get a booking, is it would be overtime, and the booking would pay for that overtime.
All right, so you're telling me that there would not be an impact other than perhaps a financial impact on a user who wanted to be there in the evening. If we pass this motion, you won't feel bound to close the doors at 8 o'clock and usher everybody out.
No, that's right. And that's why I also left the hours to 7 hours per day on weekends, because that's usually when we have our events. So if we need to fluctuate our hours to adjust to a large booking, we have that ability to do so.
Right, thank you for that. Councillor Demota?
Well, and I'm glad you brought that up because I can easily be open to voting for this motion as it is. If there's no, if the times aren't written in stone, and if there's a cost recovery opportunity, particularly if there's one that like where we could at least zero out, and it doesn't come at a cost to the community, and we're not confined to those hours, then and I think that if it is the case that it's only $2,000 for that amount of time, then I'm with Councilor Wilson on that. We might as well just open it up and then just get everybody used to it.
Councillor Butler?
My concerns are these. I'm concerned about opening the activity center on the scheduled basis suggested because I'm concerned about the activity center becoming a gathering place in a time when gathering together is not a good idea. I think it will become a gathering place for young people and for children, and I am very concerned about that. I have a concern around the responsibility of taxpayers to solve other organizations' problems. The schools have always provided space for after-school care. I think that's their responsibility. They have their reasons for not doing so, but I have a difficult time accepting that their decision means that municipal taxpayers have to, by default, assume that responsibility. I also understand that the schools said that kids who need to stay in for lunch can't stay in for lunch. So, we'll take care of that. We just can't keep doing that. For me, the issue isn't the $2,000 difference between September 21st and October 4th. I don't think we should be opening the activity on a schedule, the activity center on a schedule. I think that we can accommodate the users that we've talked about. For example, the curling rink has its own entrance, so they don't even need the center to be open. And those other activities which are scheduled and operated by other agencies could be accommodated. So I'm not really in favor of opening the activity center until we have something more like a range of activities to offer. We have no idea what the hockey season is even going to look like. I don't think we have been given any information, and I don't think it's really out there yet as to what the resumption of hockey might look like. And really, until those core activities resume, I just don't see the rationale for reopening the activity center at all, to be perfectly honest. So while I understand everyone's wishes to sort of get things back to normal, it's not normal. Again, I've mentioned it enough times, I think we have responsibility to be cautious financially. And this is one where I think it actually is most prudent to honestly just wait and see how things like hockey and curling unfold. And we don't yet have that information. We haven't even been told when the ice surfaces are expected to be ready, because I think administration doesn't really know yet. And that's fair enough. So I'm not in favor of the request as it is presented. Thank you.
I would invite some member of council to make a motion with respect to the request. Councillor McGrath.
Thank you, Mayor Ireland. I move that Council approve the additional net deficit of $30,000 to reopen the activity center starting September 21st, 2020 for local use with reduced hours as outlined in this report, pending staff availability and training. COVID response and getting through COVID-19 is going to take a full community response, and we're the leaders in this community. I'm ready to open the facility and do whatever we can do, regardless of whose job it should be, to get our community through this challenging time. Thank you.
Ready for the question? All in favor? Opposed? That motion is carried. 2 opposed. Right, we're approaching 2 hours here, and so it might be an appropriate time for a short recess before we commence with agenda item 9.4. It is now 3:18. I will say we will reconvene at 3:25. And we are adjourned, pardon me, not adjourned, we're in recess until then.
Mayor's job is tough enough. It doesn't need reminders.
It is still 3:25 by my tablet, and so we are reconvened on time. And we are at agenda item 9.4, a request for decision at today's meeting regarding approving an additional expenditure of $12,400 to provide additional custodial services for the Library and Cultural Center starting September 2nd. And
Your worship,
Mr.
once again, we'll ask Director of Culture and Rec if she could speak to this one. And Yvonne, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. This was brought for discussion on August 25th, as this was just brought to my attention that there was a request coming forward from the library with regards to operating hours. So I brought it in as quickly as I could. The recommendation is to approve the expenditure of $12,400 to provide additional custodial services for the Library and Cultural Center starting September 2nd, pending staff availability and training. On June 16th, one custodial position was funded for recall in the amount of $35,000, which allowed for the reopening of Connaught public bathrooms and partial reopening of the Library and Cultural Center in order for the Jasper Artists Guild to reopen. On August 4th, an additional net deficit of $9,000 was approved to accommodate additional cleaning of Connaught washrooms and log cabin. The new information brought forward that the Library Board approved to reopen the library on September 2nd with adjusted hours. Presently, we have limited custodial hours assigned to the facility to accommodate the opening of JAG only. We are receiving lease and janitorial revenue from the library as already reflected in the 2020 budget. Additional custodial hours will be required for the library cleaning starting September 2nd due to the heightened response of the pandemic cleaning protocols, but also access. There is a demand for library service for public computer access, printing, photocopying services, and regular library users, especially in the adult and senior age ranges. They are waiting to come in and be able to browse on the shelves and take some books out. As school restarts, there will be a demand for students for reading and resource materials. Most of the library use is local traffic from fall to spring. Part of the strategy to reopen in September is to work out details and identify concerns before the higher demand for service comes in the winter. Any questions?
Thank you, Mrs. McNabb. Questions from councillors? Councillor Butler.
Thank you, Mrs. McNabb. My question is, there's 2 parts to it. You said it says in the RFD, we are receiving lease and janitorial revenue from the library, but I assume that while the building has been closed, we have not been receiving that revenue. Is that correct? That heretofore we have not been receiving that? Could you clarify that for me?
We did not receive it while they were closed, but then they partially opened with giving books out, etc. And their lease, they continued to pay their lease.
All right, thank you. Then my question is, if we are receiving lease and janitorial revenue from the library, why do we need to allocate more money for janitorial? Why wouldn't that be covered by what the library is paying?
Your worship, through to Councillor Butler, because that amount was removed under the custodial line from the budget when council asked for the budget to be reduced. All custodial services were removed because that building was closed.
Mr. Vircho appears to have a.
Your worship, this came up internally as well. Just to clarify, that is exactly it. The library does pay for a portion of the custodial services, but the way that the budget reduction was done in the when we went through that exercise with council was that the expenditure side of the ledger was all removed, and the only expenditures that were added back in are by approval of council. So the revenue side, yes, they will be paying. But in order for us to get approval for the expenditure side, we have to come to council for each of those expenditures. So that's why you're seeing that here today.
Mr. Don?
Thank you, Your Worship. And just to add to that clarification, that is why you see that council approved the expenditure of 12,400 and not an additional net deficit of 12,400.
Got it. Thank you.
Councillor McGrath.
Thank you, Mayor Ireland. With everything in relation to COVID, it's costing more, especially for janitorial positions and janitorial responsibilities to operate any facility. I move that council approve the expenditure of $12,400 to provide additional custodial services for the Library and Cultural Center starting September 2nd, 2020, pending staff availability and training.
Thank you for that motion. However, I will set that aside for the moment because we have to do a motion to waive notice first. This only came to light a week ago, and so we must first waive the necessary notice. So if you would like to make that motion, or somebody would, Councillor Janot?
I'll make the motion to waive notice on this motion.
All right, so I have a motion from Councillor Janot. The council waive the necessary notice in order to make a decision on custodial services for the reopening of the Jasper Municipal Library at today's meeting. Any debate? Councillor Butler?
I'm just wondering, Mrs. McNabb, if you know, I don't particularly object to waiver of notice, but all of these reopening questions have come to us with a lot of notice, and this didn't. Is that because, do you know, just loss of communication, or did the library only recently decide? I think we only saw this last week, and I don't know if Councilor McGrath or Mrs. McNabb, if you know why that is, that we didn't see this coming a little sooner.
Your worship, through to Councillor Butler, I just received the information, and so as soon as I received the information, I put it on a request for decision. I'm not sure when the decision was made by the library board, but unfortunately, I think it was a loss of communication between the library and the cultural center, but I put it on as soon as I received notice.
Fair enough. Thank you very much.
Councillor McGrath?
Sorry, Mrs. McNabb answered the question perfectly.
Okay. All right, thank you both for that then. And so I will call the question on waiver of notice. All in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. And then I can return to the motion put forward by Councillor McGrath that council approve the expenditure of $12,400 to provide additional custodial services for the Library and Cultural Center starting September 2nd, 2020, pending staff availability and training. There's no further debate. All in favor? I'm sorry, Councillor Butler.
I'm sorry. I just wanted to say that while it wasn't part of the RFD, that the question was asked about capacity and social distancing and so on last week, and Councillor McGrath provided some information on the library's plan with respect to that, and I wanted to congratulate them. I thought it was very well thought out, and that they've done a really good job of anticipating what reopening will look like, because I think there have been some concerns about gathering and congregating, and I think they are well prepared to deal with that, and should be noted. Thank you.
Thank you. I will call the question then. All in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. That takes us to agenda item 9.5, communications coordinator. Mr. Furcho, are you presenting that?
Your worship, that'll go to our legislative services manager. Christine will take that. Thanks.
Thank you. So we are back today with the report for the communications coordinator. There have been no changes to the information presented since the last meeting. This came before council for notice on August 18th, and there was discussion at 2 committee of the whole meetings. So therefore we are back for decision today. And the only change we had made last time was to clarify the motion so it wouldn't place council in a set predicament for the 2021 budget, other than to approve the creation of a full-time continuous communications coordinator position in the Legislative Services Department, and the approval of the additional net deficit for the remainder of 2020. I am happy to answer any questions council may have on this item. Thank you.
Thank you for that report. Questions from councillors? Councillor DeMota.
I'm in favor of communications position. I'm not in favor of the way it's presented still, and people have heard my arguments, and I'm not trying to be a stick in the mud about it. I just don't have the right information, I feel, to make a decision based on a position becoming available. Still at this point with the proposal, it says possible job outline. I'm not in favor of putting money towards something without some concrete job task list or whatever the relevance of that job is going to be concerned with, not possibly concerned with. So I kind of thought it's kind of like going to the bank and asking for a car loan and then telling the bank, yeah, I don't know if I'm going to put it on the car. Maybe I won't even use it for the car. They're going to say no. So I still have a problem with it. To me, it's not a good enough proposal for me to say yes to.
Councillor McGrath.
Thank you, Mayor Ireland. I'm certainly in favor of a communications position within the municipality of Jasper. And last week at our committee of the whole meeting, I expressed my discomfort with where this was placed in the organizational structure. There was some concern that this is not necessarily council's realm of deciding where in a structure position might be placed, but I believe it is. And the reason why I feel it is in our realm to care about the structure of this position being created is because we oversee the CAO and we define what the CAO's responsibilities will be. I believe that this position is very important for the municipality of Jasper to move forward. And I believe that for its greatest success, it should be placed as a direct report underneath the CAO for the municipality of Jasper as a direct report. I do support this position being created. With the way in which I'm presenting this position, I do not know the dollar allocation specifically, but I would be in favor of rewording the motion from the way it's been presented. And if council has an appetite to go down this road with me, to have a creative communications position created directly underneath the CAO for the municipality of Jasper that allows our communications to further the community as a whole.
Other councillors? Councillor Wilson?
I'm not in favor of reworking this motion, and I'd be comfortable putting this motion forward. I have full trust in administration, and I feel like they're putting it in the position where they see it most benefiting all of staff and all of our organization. And I don't need to meddle in that, so I would support the motion as it is, and I would make that motion, but I'll leave it up to councillors before I put that motion forward.
Well, you can put it forward and somebody can make an amendment if they, or at least.
Okay, well, I'll put the motion forward that council approve the creation of a full-time continuous communications coordinator position in Legislative Services Department and approve an additional net deficit of $13,504 to fund the position for the remainder of 2020 starting in October.
Thank you. So that motion is on the table. Councillor Butler, you wish to speak to the motion?
I do, thank you. To Councillor McGrath's point, I agree that a question of where in the organization a position ought to sit, particularly whether it should sit as a direct report or lower in the organizational structure, is a question that council can consider. But I don't think that's a question for us to consider now. And I spoke about this last week. We will be replacing our CAO, and I think that there will very likely be some conversations coming up in the next months in conjunction with the CAO getting underway of possible restructuring and organizing. And so by implementing this position as directed, I don't think we are tying our hands in considering whether communications should be handled differently within the organization. We could still do that. What would be one outcome of Councillor McGrath's suggestion that we now direct that this position be placed as a direct report is that it would become by virtue, therefore, a management position. And there are implications to that that would, in my view, probably require further discussion. And I think it's beyond the scope here. So I'm in favor of moving forward. I am not particularly concerned about the job description. This is to Councillor Demota's point. And the reason is, I think that we have all at one time or another agreed that we really do need to address the question of a communications policy. I'm in favor of this motion on the understanding that we will then carry on and do so and address a communications policy. And in doing so, I think we will have all the opportunity we need to have input into how this position would function. So I'm satisfied with what we see. Fiscally, all we're agreeing to here is that we would need $13,500 of additional funding for the remainder of the current year. The other reason I'm in favor is because of the notation that is made at the bottom of the recommendation section, where administration has pointed out that we will have the opportunity to determine within the organization how this is funded through the budgeting process. So even though the position itself nets out at $60-some thousand, that doesn't all have to be new money. So I'm comforted enough that this is a good way to go forward and maintain the higher level of communication that we have asked for and that we have received, and that has honestly been very well done, I think. And so I'm in favor of moving forward with this.
Councillor Demota and then Councillor Journeau.
I agree with the strategic relevance. I agree with having person in the organization to assist us or maybe lead in having this position. Again, if I'm applying for a job somewhere and I'm going for a job interview and somebody has in front of me saying, it's possible that you might be doing this or you might be doing this, and this could be part of your job description. Would you like the job? So I don't want to meddle too much into administrative things, but we're being asked to hand over money for a position to approve money for a position. I don't want to come across as from a doling perspective. But what I'm saying is, if we don't have a job description for that position, then I don't know why we're approving it, because it doesn't make sense. I don't know what I'm approving. So we're approving a position, but for what?
Councillor Journeau?
Thank you. I think we've all recognized the need for more communications. Under the present COVID, we've done lots of work under the social media, which has gone well. However, more needs to be done, and it has come, what has been done has come at the expense of work from people who are not full-time employed in this position. So in the options, it lists social media and public engagement. So one of the public engagement we have before us is the item of cardboard, education and coordinating of that. So, and the website maintenance, not aware of that. But I think that we have a need to communicate more with the public, certainly our taxpayers. And I look forward to a work in progress. I'm not, like Councillor Demota, want to be specific on what the duties are. I see it as a work in progress, and I fully support administration's choices and decisions to move forward with this.
I note that in the background material, it is confirmed that the intent is that the individual who occupies the position or the position itself will provide services to the organization as a whole. So where that position is housed is, to me at least, of less consequence. But if it assists any other councillor, I would be prepared to propose as a friendly amendment that the recommendation itself contain those words. That is, that council approve the creation of a full-time continuous communications coordinator position for the organization as a whole to be located within the Legislative Services Department and approve a net deficit of $13,500. Just to make it abundantly clear that wherever it is housed, the purpose of this position is to provide communication services for the organization. As I say it, it is clear in the backgrounder that that is the intent, but it's not clear in the motion. So if there is any hesitation on that ground, because we do have a communications position in a department that serves a department, which is not what we want on this occasion. To me, it makes sense that it's in the Legislative Services Department for precisely the reasons that Councillor Journeau expressed earlier. An awful lot of our communication is going to revolve around our interaction with the public through bylaws. And so it makes sense that it sits with the people that deal regularly with the bylaws. But firstly, if Councillor Wilson would be inclined to accept that as a friendly amendment, I would put it forward in that sense, just to add a tiny bit of clarity and I hope some comfort to council. Okay, you accept that as friendly? Okay. Any other debate on it? So it doesn't need amended because it is amended by the mover as a friendly amendment. So I won't reread it. If you're ready for the question, all in favor? Any opposed? There is one opposed. That is carried. All right, that takes us to agenda item 9.6, Jasper Day proclamation. Councillor Demota.
Yeah, sorry, I had my hand up before we
Oh.
moved there, and I just wanted to say, just because I wasn't in favor of that last motion, like another motion before, it doesn't mean I'm not in favor of having a communications position. And just like I wasn't in favor of what was proposed with the cardboard, doesn't mean that I think everybody should throw their cardboard out the window. So I just wanted to make clear that, and I congratulate council for moving forward on that. Okay, so anyway, this is the first time I've actually done something like this in as far as putting a proclamation forward. So I don't know if it would operate the same way as a motion where the mayor would read it out and then call for debate on it, because I don't know how healthy that would be. So I just wanted to say that, you know, I think everybody's had the opportunity to read it. I think maybe hearing it out loud from someone that can better enunciate would be pretty good. I do want to say that the province has recognized that the month of September is the month for culture days, and the Minister of Culture and Multiculturalism and Status of Women stated that Alberta Culture Days demonstrate our vibrant arts, culture, and diversity and community spirit. And it was brought to my attention after our discussions last week. Ms. Guerra had said that having Jasper Days, or having Jasper Day lines up perfectly with Culture Days. So I thought I would say that. And also the province recognizes that the September is also the month of the artists in Alberta. So that, I think, gives an opportunity to add a little bit of culture to our culture, and celebrating our successes from the summertime as a diverse and unique community. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Comments from other councillors? Councillor Journeau?
I support an opportunity to say, rah, rah, good for us at the end of the harvest season. Thank you.
Councillor Wilson?
Unfortunately, I'm currently not ready to make a decision on this, and if the question were to be called, I would vote not in favor. To quote another councillor, I just don't feel like I have the right information yet. I feel like we're getting pushed into this by, unfortunately, one councillor, and it could be a great idea. It could be, you know, a really good thing that could happen, and we could celebrate this in years to come. But I find it a bit distractionary. It kind of came about very quickly, and council doesn't move that quickly. We haven't moved that quickly on any topic in the last 3 years, and I don't think it's needed in this crossroads. And honestly, this could turn out to be such a great thing, but it may flop if we vote on this year. There will be no get together. There'll be, hey, there's a Jasper Day. There's this proclamation. What does that mean? Well, we don't know yet. We're thinking about doing some certain things. So let's plan for it. If this is something you really feel passionate about, I think we should spend some time on it and actually know what it means. We're picking a day that's already has some significance for the fall equinox. Well, why is that Jasper Day? I honestly, I can't get behind it at this point. I feel some other councillors might just feel like, oh, it's a good idea, and I don't want to like rain on your parade. So they're going with it. But do we need to do that this year? Do we need to proclaim something for years to come? Councillor Butler had suggested that he'd be in support of proclaiming it for 1 year. Well, let's do something a little bit more substantial. Work on it. Feel it all out, and go for it next year if we do still feel that Jasper Day should be thing.
Councillor Butler?
No, I hate that I'm not in support, but for some of the reasons that Councillor Wilson mentioned and others, I just can't support it. To proclaim a day, essentially a holiday for the community on an ongoing basis and into the future indefinitely, I feel it's a little beyond my pay grade right now, particularly if we haven't taken the time to consider it further. This only came onto the agenda a couple of weeks ago. My concern is that my other concern is that we spent a lot of time, this council did, crafting a proclamations policy. And right there, we say the sponsoring agency must be a not-for-profit organization. And, you know, we talked quite a bit about what we meant by that. And I think that what we meant by that is that these things should grow from the community, not just, oh, well, we've decided. And I have to say that we've received a lot of input in the past few months from across the community, many letters, a lot of opinions, absolutely none of which have been about this. I don't feel that there is a movement in the community. If there was, if I had that sense, I would be all over it. If we were asked to proclaim Jasper in January, for example, as a community event, absolutely, because I would know that it was supported and had arisen from within the community rather than, you know, just here from a councillor. So my primary concern is that we have a proclamations policy. We put a lot of thought into it. And I think in a lot of ways, this is kind of what we said we wouldn't be doing, that we would be responsive to the community. So for that reason, I cannot find myself in favor of it. I had said I could probably be in favor of it if it was for this year, but that isn't the way it's presented. So thank you.
Councillor McGrath?
Thank you. I certainly don't feel pushed by anyone. I feel that if I wanted to not proclaim Jasper Day, I simply wouldn't proclaim Jasper Day, but I'm very optimistic, and I also understand that optimism and unity is what creates community. And there's no harm in this approach. It's not necessarily saying this is what we're going to be doing on Jasper Day, but as Councillor Demota explained, that's not the intention of Jasper Day. I believe that it's positive, and I'm optimistic and happy to support a day where we celebrate our residents, and therefore I will vote in favor of Jasper Day proclamation.
Councillor Demota?
I guess I'll just close comments by saying that unfortunately, Councillor Kelleher MP couldn't be here today, and I know that she's been in favor of this as well, and she thinks it's great for the community and people embracing our uniqueness. And I apologize now that because I feel like you're in an awkward position, just judging by the way the comments have been going, and I apologize for putting council in this position. And it's supposed to be a unifying thing and not a divisive thing. And I feel that there might be from what I've been feeling, a kind of stick in the mud approach by saying that we haven't made decisions so hastily in the past. So I'm not going to vote for this because this is moving too fast. I introduced this in May, I believe, initially. So, and that came from the community. Thank you.
From my perspective, and I thought your comment was directed toward me in part, and there's no need to feel any sense of regret to put people in an uncomfortable situation. My concern is, as expressed, I think, by Councillor Wilson and Councillor Butler. And I have the sense that we're not there yet. The notion might be good, but I am sensing that I'm in a position where I'm sort of asked to vote on pumpkin pie at Thanksgiving, and yet the pumpkin pie hasn't been cooked yet. I mean, it just, pumpkin pie is great, but you gotta take the time to cook it. And I feel that this is undercooked. There's much work to be done to bring this out in a form that I could support it. And I share Councillor Wilson's concern that if we proclaim it today and nothing actually much happens on the third Saturday of this month, this year, will we lose the opportunity to regain it? And it is an important notion to have a day of celebration of community, but that makes it all that much more important to get it right. And I just feel that this is a bit of an undercooked pie to serve just now. But in time, it might be exactly right. So that's my concern. Councillor Demoda.
I would say give the community all the ingredients or the opportunity to get their ingredients and make the pie themselves. So I see what you're saying, and that does have relevance to what you just said, but I think you got to start somewhere, and it can't be a flop. If people just go out and do something or get together with their neighbors or go to a bar or restaurant, or somebody holds a porch session somewhere, or a bunch of people hold porch sessions, or we have an event on the stage, if that's even possible, with social distancing, something. It's a start somewhere, and then you build on that. You don't have to have everything in place to start something. We're not hosting an event. It's just like, let's start with a date, just like they did with Saint Jean Baptiste. I brought that up last time around, and I think it's just something to grow from. So you plant the seed. The seed doesn't become a plant overnight. So I think we start with the seed, let it grow, let other people grasp onto it, let Habitat for the Arts grasp onto it, let other entities in the community grasp onto it, and bake that pumpkin pie together.
We do not formally have a motion on the table. I think what we would typically have, it's there, that council annually proclaim the third Saturday in September as Jasper Day, or alternatively, we could put forward a motion that council approve the Jasper Day proclamation as presented. But your motion to put forward.
Yeah, I'm comfortable with that latter part.
Right, so I have a motion from Councillor Demoda that council approve the Jasper Day proclamation as presented in today's agenda. Any further debate? All in favor? Opposed? There were 3 on each side. That motion carries. That takes us to agenda item 9.7, Jasper Housing Corporation succession plan. Mr. Furcho.
Your Worship, thank you. Today, this report is just by way of notice, and after all of the pie analogies, I hope no one throws one at me for this one. This is Proposing a plan of action to maintain the forward momentum in the Jasper Community Housing Corporation. I'm still around for the next couple months, and there are some changes required. So in this report, listing the two, we're currently quite far along on the development of the Connaught Drive project, and we are also working on some side projects around seniors housing. And to maintain that, there's basically two parts to this report. One is that my role by way of the Articles of Incorporation is the Jasper Community Housing Corporation Board Chair, and that Council look at that role and potentially ask the Housing Corporation to amend Section 24, that the role could be filled by someone else, potentially one of the council members that have some exposure to this work, to maintain that seat and that process. And secondly, when directions given from the board to the Housing Corp itself, I function as the manager of the Housing Corporation and work with consultants. So that coordination role of the JCHC manager, I think the way we've proposed it here is that the expertise required for managing the consultants and working on both the governance and financing side, as well as the actual hard assets, the site preparation, the servicing, water, sewer, storm, all of those things, access, transportation, shallow services, as well as the actual construction part, and working with the Housing Corporation and taking the matters that come from the corporation to a report format in order for council to make decisions. All of those things would need somebody to do that. And the way to have that work done is looking at an RFQ, which is simply a request for quotations. So council could select potentially one or more people that would fit that role on an as and when basis for an hourly rate to provide that service. So both of these things are by way of notice today. And my question really here is I've proposed coming back for September 8th for the committee of the whole for discussion. If council would like to see this back, and if they would, is there any additional information council would like to see on the 8th for discussion, or is this can simply move to decision on the 15th, or how would council like to proceed?
Councillor Butler.
Thank you, Mr. Fritcho. Yeah, I'm happy to see this coming forward. I appreciate very much your concern, Mr. Fritcho, that we don't lose momentum on this project. We actually just passed with last reading the borrowing bylaw to fill out the $250,000 combined grant and interest-free loan that we've got to drive this, the Connaught Drive project forward. And I'm a little concerned about potential loss of momentum because Mr. Fritcho has done an outstanding job wearing those two hats, both manager of the JCHC and chair of the JCHC. That particular little structural quirk is something that I wondered about from day one, which is it's quite odd to have the manager of any board the same person as the chair. So I think it's worked out well, but something that we should look at. The JCHC is very likely to assume a broader role as we work towards success. So I think it is a good time to look at restructuring the board a little bit. And I certainly agree that right now, hiring some contracted help for implementation would be a really good idea just at the moment. So I'm in favor of both pieces of that and happy to see it come back for a little further discussion next week. Now that I've already started discussing it. I could have said all that next week, but I'm happy to see it coming before us.
I am also happy that you're on top of this, Mr. Fritcho. That sense of continuity and energy needs to be maintained. So thank you for bringing it forward. I just have one question, and that is this the right sequence, or should, rather than council recommending to JCHC, should they be recommending to us? I just, like, what standing does council have to make a recommendation that direction rather than that entity making a recommendation to us. And who established the articles in the first place? Was it council, or it's lost in the deep recesses of my mind. In other words, I forget how this happened and who did what, but it is important that if we're going to make changes, we do it procedurally properly. And so I just throw that out. Which order should this be going in? Ms. Nadon?
Thank you, Your Worship. Mr. Furcho asked me to look into this last week and to see what the process would be, particularly around who is chairing the board meetings. And the Articles of Association are the JCHC Articles of Association. And there is a process that is outlined on the provincial website on how to modify those articles, and the board itself has to pass a special resolution to amend a specific section, whatever it might be, of their own Articles of Association. So I don't think council has really any authority on a external board. External might be in the keyword here perhaps, but anyway, the Articles of Association are the JCHCs, and that board has to pass a special resolution in order to amend them. And the part where the municipal manager is an outdated term now, but where that is captured is in the Articles of Association. There's other pieces that go to forming that corporation, and there's an agreement, I think it might be the Memorandum of Association, if I'm not mistaken, that outlines the relationship between the municipality of Jasper and the JCHC. But specifically for this item being the Articles of Association, like I repeated 3 times now, it has to be a special resolution of the JCHC board. However we get them to do that is a bad way to put it again, but it is on them to make that change.
Again, my question is, could they just be doing this on their own initiative and tell us about it? Could they say that they are recommending that we approve that they do it? I mean, there's a lot of ways this could roll out, and I feel somewhat uncomfortable sitting as council telling a separately incorporated entity how they should be structured internally. It just seems to me that it should be coming from them saying, we see this need and this is what we're doing, thought we'd give you a heads up. But I mean, here we are, right? Maybe it's just a chicken and an egg endless discussion. Councillor Butler?
Yeah, those are all really good points. And we're starting a conversation that I think we should have next week. But part of the question always when something comes by way of notice is what further information would be required. So I'd like to suggest that the documentation that Ms. Dawn just referred to, so articles of incorporation, and then I think, did you mention that there was an agreement?
If I may, Your Worship, through to Councillor Butler, we do have on file essentially a package of documents that relate to when the JCHC was initially formed. So there are certificates of incorporation and a variety of items there that we could certainly provide if it would help council navigate this discussion.
So I would suggest that any of that it's, I don't know if we're talking about shelves full of documentation, keep it reasonable, that maybe that be shared as part of the committee of the whole agenda, and then we could have a look and get a way forward. The thing is that it also ties into our conversations that we sort of suspended for the time being, but our conversations around boards and committees and how that functions, because certainly mostly the JCHC has functioned as an advisory board to council. So in that respect, its formulation is a matter for council to be concerned with. But maybe if we have that information in front of us, we can suss this out next week and get a go forward.
I agree.
Yeah, Your Worship, thank you. We'll provide that information for next week. And if I could, just by closing, I'd just like to say thank you to Councillor Butler for his role in the JCHC board, I've relied on him a little bit here in trying to figure out what I do with this change and how I bring it forward. So I thank you for that. And hopefully next week we can sort out the details.
All right, thank you. That allows us to move to agenda item 10, correspondence for information, consideration, or action. Firstly, we have a letter from ATCO Electric concerning the possibility of changing the franchise fee amount. Mr. Purchell?
Your worship, both of these, the natural gas and the electrical franchise fees, council actually was, it's been a while ago. So that we just had redone the 10-year on the gas one, but I think that was the previous council. And annually these things come up, whether we need enough lead time before they start their billing cycles to know if they would like to see a change in the franchise fees, in the agreements, that it's simply flow through funding that the utility charges the customer, and the customer then pays that fee, and we collect that fee. So the idea being that with taxation, there's the value that comes to the municipality is based on property value assessments or commercial rates. This system of using franchise fees is based on the volume of the commodity that's being used by each entity or individual, that then is used as a way of collecting some revenues through the franchise fee to the municipality. And each year we're asked if we would like to adjust those fees or not. And we have the table that we have set within each agreement that unless council would like something done differently, we simply just say no change. An example being if we wanted to say in the electrical world, change some lighting in the community somewhere, one way of funding that would be to change the rate model and pay back that new lighting with a franchise fee where it's recovered and paid for through electrical costs. So it's just, both of these are in front of you. They come every year, and we do have multi-year agreements set up with both, with the rates embedded in them. This is if council simply wants a change or not.
Any comments, Councillor Butler?
Thanks. Just a question. The 6% of distribution charge applies to all distribution of electricity throughout the community, that going to homes, that going to businesses, and that which is powering our streetlights and our public buildings. I'm correct in that, am I? So I'm just kind of interested in knowing, is it possible to know what the electrical bill notionally for the community, for the municipality of Jasper is, by which I would mean all of our facilities, and I guess our streetlights and other public. If I asked that question, would I be causing a room full of people to scurry about for 3 days to give me an answer, or would it be readily at hand?
Your worship, through to Councillor Butler. So annually, what they used to do is present an annual report to me, and I had that process change where they'd provide that annual report to council, and I tried to get that to happen in a public meeting, and just once in a while, just through staffing changes and crunch times and whatnot, that has just arrived as an attachment. And so what you're asking for is a lot of information like that is generally in the annual report, and when those individuals present, that kind of information can be made available. So I'd just say maybe what I could look into is the next time they're looking at an annual report to be given to us, that we could look at having them come to council. And then there's that, but there's a ton more information that they could provide as well.
Yeah, that's fine, because there's no urgency, and it causes me to recall that we did have ATCO in front of us, and I think they did present some sort of an annual report some months ago. So maybe the answer to my question is there, and I can go look. So I'm fine with that. Thank you.
From my perspective, I don't feel inclined to make any change, but if council wants to consider this further, we can certainly put it down. We have some lead time, but it is important to make a decision in a somewhat timely manner. But given the circumstances which blanket the world right now, if the lights go off and the heat goes out, it will be what it will be in any event. It does not seem to me that this is a time to be looking at adjusting the rate. Just carry on. We have this opportunity every year, but for the time being, I can't see that there's any real advantage in dealing with it. We will see what happens in the next few weeks, probably, with respect to community economic sustainability. And in the long term, a little change in franchise fees is not likely to benefit anyone, including the municipality. So I think it's important that the information came forward. I'm not inclined to take it further, but council has every right to consider it in depth and see where we want to go. So should this come back for further discussion at a subsequent meeting of Committee of the Whole? Anybody have an interest? Mm-hmm. I'm seeing mostly negative shakes of the head. I think I'm seeing that from the silhouette on the screen. So thank you, Mr. Virtue. I think council is aware it's been presented for information, and I think no further action is required.
No, thank you, Your Worship. I'll advise both writers. It's the normal practice each year is we typically don't. And like I said, those rates that we've agreed to are all within the multi-year agreements with some incremental changes. So thank you.
Right. Thank you. Agenda item 11. Is there any other new business for council? Councillor McGrath.
Thank you, Mayor Ireland. And I would have liked to save this new business for a Committee of the Whole meeting. I tried last week to bring it up, but it didn't go over very well. I'm curious to see, along with Councillor Butler's suggestion of a communications policy coming forward now that we have a communications position, on council's appetite to direct administration in the next couple months, next near future, in bringing forward a social media policy that would apply to employees of the municipality of Jasper as well as elected officials.
Just for my own edification, a social media policy separate from a communications policy or embedded within a communications policy?
I'd have to do a little more research. I do have some initial research done on what social media policies consist of in other communities. They seem to be a standalone policy, and that's what I've seen thus far, but certainly not an expert on the subject.
Okay. Thank you for that. Councillor Butler.
Thank you, Councillor McGrath, for bringing that up. I would like to see council address itself to social media policy. I would see it being appropriate as part of the communications policy. I don't feel that strongly about it. If we chose to consider it separately, we could do so. But to me, it would be appropriate to have it as part of that conversation. But I do think it's an important one to have. So, thank you.
I'm in favor of developing such policies, whether it is one or separate, but I think that is the direction in which we have been trying to move ourselves in any event. I'm not sure where administration might be on with either of those now. Ms. Nadal?
Thank you, Your Worship. We currently do have a communications policy as well as a public engagement policy. So they're located under Section 8, governance, and a social media policy we do not have. So I would suggest that, because it was also brought forward by Councillor Demota recently, that public engagement policy is a requirement of the MGA, which we've had in place, we meet the requirements currently. What we may be a little bit behind is the review of that policy at a set interval of time. But essentially what I'm suggesting is that those three policies, the public engagement policy maybe less so, but sort of go hand in hand. And if we are in the business of reviewing those, we should maybe take a broader approach that way. And with broader support at the council table, which we're seeing today, we can certainly get the ball rolling on doing some research and providing some documentation to council to get this conversation started at a committee of the whole. Having that said, thank you for your approval of the communications coordinator position. It hasn't started yet. It will be coming, and of course, knowing that we will have the resources to actively work on those items in the future certainly sets us up differently for a policy discussion. And yeah, so I would suggest that with this consensus from council, we can return at an upcoming committee of the whole meeting with some documentation for council to review on current policies and then develop how we want to go forward.
Thank you. So thank you for bringing that up, Councilor McGrath. Sounds like it is a direction that administration has taken, so something will come back to us. And I'm going to say in the relatively near future, whatever that might mean. You can read between the lines. Is there any other new business for council? Ms. Nadon.
Thank you, Your Worship. We didn't add this item to the agenda, but the September 22nd council meeting was not initially scheduled on the council calendar as it was supposed to be AUMA that week. And now that there is a virtual program available, that programming is not starting until the Wednesday evening, I believe, is the opening reception. So September 22nd and the following week, which happens to be a fifth Tuesday, we do not have scheduled council meetings. So technically the 22nd would be a committee of the whole day, but currently that is not scheduled on the calendar. And if council wishes to meet that day, a decision would have to be made at a regular meeting to then provide notice and announce that that meeting would be held. So that is an item we wanted to bring forward to council and see what might unfold on that front. And having that said, we are also working on scheduling an intergovernmental meeting with Parks Canada, which is usually held on a Tuesday. And the 22nd could be that day as well. So we have word from Parks Canada that the superintendent is available in the morning on that day. So perhaps something to consider for council on upcoming discussions or decisions and potentially an intergovernmental meeting.
Well, thank you for bringing that forward. Yes, it is an available day since AUMA will be happening only virtually and not on that day. So subject to the will of council, I would be interested. There is always much work to be done. So both a committee of the whole meeting on that day and, if possible, an intergovernmental meeting with Parks Canada. I think one is due soon in any event. And so if it's otherwise a free Tuesday, I think I would be in favor of making use of our time on that day for those purposes. I see Councillor Butler. You're good with it? Okay. Right. So we would need a motion though today to do that.
Mr. Furcho indicates that a motion today would be desirable. Technically, there is another. It just puts us a week out for trying to book a meeting with Parks Canada if we delay until 2 weeks from now. So, and we are in preliminary arrangements, but the word I get from Parks currently is that the morning of the 22nd would work for them. So maybe a committee of the whole meeting, but at 1:30 might be the amenable solution. And
with an intergovernmental
in the
potential in the morning. All right.
And that would still leave you with your 29th available. I tried to not commit you on a fifth Tuesday, recognizing that that's a break for council. And
So if a counselor is interested to make a motion, then that council schedule an intergovernmental meeting for Tuesday, September 22nd at 1:30 p.m. I'm sorry. Yes, not intergovernmental, committee of the whole for 1:30 p.m. on that date, and attempt or direct administration to attempt to schedule an intergovernmental meeting for that day in the morning. That is moved by Councillor Butler. Okay, all in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. Thank you for attention to that detail. Any other new business? Councillor Butler.
I apologize for bringing up this item. I meant to mention it at the beginning. I'm wondering if, as there has been a decision that the library is reopening, if it would be apropos that we should have a discussion next week about our meetings and when or if it is time to make these meetings fully public. And it isn't maybe as simple a question as we might hope it would be, because if we make these meetings public and follow our bylaw, we'll have to wear masks. So that our meetings are public, they're not publicly attended, but I think someone is likely to ask the question once it becomes public that the building is open. So perhaps we ought to ask admin to, well, admin doesn't have to do anything. We should just task ourselves with having a conversation about that next week.
Is there any objection to adding that to next week's committee of the whole? No. All good? All right. So just a note to add that discussion topic, and no extra effort need be done by administration other than listing that topic on the agenda. Is there any other new business? This is a record. All right, councillor reports. Are there any councillor reports? Councillor McGrath.
Thank you very much, Mayor Ireland. Next week, I will be attending the Municipal Inclusion Committee on Thursday. Community conversations will shift from once monthly to weekly, and that will be every Wednesday from 1 to 2 p.m. focused on a separate life stage each week. I regret that I will not be available tomorrow for the community conversation, but the rest of the month I should be able to attend. And I also have a library board meeting on September 9th. One other thing that I wanted to mention, sort of in councillor reports, but also for events upcoming, is that on September 23rd, both Councillor Keller-MP and I have been asked to be on a panel for women of the West Yellowhead Women in Local Government. So we are honored to be part of that, and we will be in attendance, I believe virtually on September 23rd.
Thank you. Councillor Journeau.
Yes, I'd like to speak about the Trans-Canada Yellowhead Highway. While we've not met as a group for quite some time now, we've had Zoom meetings. The attendance is actually diminishing. However, the director has been very active in providing emails, conversations, and discussions back and forth to encourage participation. And one of the events that has occurred, despite the fact that, budgets are tight and it'd be hard for the Yellowhead Association to go back to the existing members because we're losing members for more money. There is an interest by the public to get things done. So as a frequent driver from Edmonton to Vancouver, it became very apparent to me for a long time that BC does a better job of maintaining their highways than Alberta. And Alberta this year, especially Highway 16, for those of you who go to Edmonton back, is has no program to aggressively resurface it, basically patching. So that, because there's a lot, people can't drive outside the country, they're driving a lot within the province. They have noticed it as well, and they've expressed comments. So comments go back to municipalities, municipalities go back to the association and saying, oh yeah, well, there's a lobby group that can work for you. So there might be some good life to the Trans-Canada Yellowhead Highway Association in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Chernow. Any other councillor reports? If not, we have a list of upcoming events. Community Futures Business Walk on September 21st and the virtual AUMA convention on September 23rd and 25th. And prior to either of those, just a reminder that the Victim Services golf tournament is on the 11th, I believe. Is there anything else to bring to council's attention? If not, I will entertain a motion to adjourn at 4:35 p.m. Councillor Demota, all in favor? We are adjourned.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good afternoon.
Thank you, Councillor McGrath.
Thank you, everybody. Good job, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, former deputy.